we have Linda. If you would like to share your question or your reaction, that would be awesome.
Well, Patrick, congratulations. It was smashing. It struck me so deeply, like lightning, and opening myself up to listen what comes up in me as well during your fish story hit me quite deeply. And it occurred to me in that moment that I realized how important it is to pay attention to any image that comes in your dreams. And then it struck me, what would have happened if you continued the dream and you took the fish out to the Seine and threw it into the water? And what would have evolved in that instance? And then how would you have interpreted it? Would all that intelligence that came to you afterward come to you? Or would that have seemed that solved the dream? Because that happens to me a lot in dreams. I either cut them short or recently I had a big dream where I thought something big was coming to me, but it scared me so much that I stopped it. So can you speak a little to that?
Yeah, as I said, I was sort of relieved that I was left not I was left at that stage not really knowing what to do with the fish. It would have been worse, or an indication of something worse, had I actually taken the fish to the river or to some body of water. It's, of course, once the dream was down on paper, and you can then sort of see it objectively, and then you go through it stage by stage with your associations, as I did in this case. What do I associate with the fish and so on. And then you suddenly realize, well, wait a second, there was a miracle. I mean, I assumed this fish had come through the ceiling, undamaged ceiling, into the pan. And then it dawned on me, oh, wait a second. The fish coming down. And what am I doing? I'm about to write something about the connection between dream and Eucharist, the fish. So what I'm saying is, had I actually taken it to the water, I think it would have indicated that more work would have been necessary. And in this case, by the unconscious, in a sense, withholding that choice from me, although the apartment I was dreaming about was actually close to the River Seine. So, it was almost willfully held back by the unconscious, indicated to me that the difficulties I would have consciously to stick with the work, to actually receive inspiration from the unconscious, would not be as difficult as it probably would have been had I taken it to the Seine, and the fish would have disappeared. And then I would have realized after the dream, oh, I made a big mistake. Of course, you can reverse then, because consciousness changes everything. But it's sort of, I think it's important to see at what point you make the mistake and to what degree you're at least able to not make it worse. And had I taken it to the collective vessel, so to speak, to the river where it would have disappeared, the indication would have been you'll have a hard time concentrating on this subject matter, and you have to change your attitude completely. So it's a matter of degree, I would say. I mean, I made a major mistake, but I became aware of it during the conscious work. That's why I'm saying it's so important. And the Eucharist is not complete before we have sort of done everything with our rational mind analyzing the dream and so on in order to arrive at a meaning. Does that answer it? Not quite, or?
I think you're muted, Linda.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Yes, definitely. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Okay.
Very, very helpful. Grazie.
Good. So again, the main point is, do you recognize the mistake? Once you've recognized it, there's consciousness, and then you can work from there.
Yeah.
You know, but it could have also meant that I just thought I had a nice dream about Paris, and what a weird apartment, my translator has here, where what was that fish all about? Why was he not there when all of this was happening? And so on,
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Wade, I think your hand's up.
Thank you. And thank you, Patrick. That was such a great presentation. I really appreciate it. I too was struck by this part at the beginning with your own dream of this fish. And it might be hard for me to articulate kind of what I'm asking or wanting you to maybe say more on, but this concept of the need for the fish to not be put back into the water, but to actually be cooked and eaten struck me as the part of the necessity for the God to die for
Yes.
this. And I'm wondering if it's related to this issue of projection onto a God that needs to die in order for someone to have an experience of the transpersonal reality of the psyche for themselves, this immediate experience that is the redemptive kind of meaning of their own life. Something horrible has to happen in the sense of this thing that gives them meaning dying for them to then have kind of this personal experience. I don't know if that's making sense, but for me, that part of your presentation was really meaningful.
Well, let's put it this way. Yes, it's horrible, but that's probably not the main point. It is horrible. I think because we have a conflict. The conflict is in the fact that we project it, and we project the value. It is a horror to transform these contents into something that then becomes a living reality in you. That also is horrible in the sense of it's a lot of work. But the horror is not really the main point. The horror is in our keeping the projection outside. That's why I'm saying the fish, and not only, of course, the fish, not only the symbol that stands for the highest value, but also, as I pointed out, the fish also has a dimension or an aspect of pure primordial concupiscentia, raw desirousness, primitive desirousness, almost what Ed would call or compare to the protoplasm, just take in, wildly desirous. That has to be dissected. It has to be cut with a knife. Consciousness has to work on it in order for us to digest it. Therefore, all sorts of horribleness we project onto it, as we do when it comes to the death of the Savior, for instance, is really beside the point. Is we say it's horrible and terrible because we do not want it to occur in us. That is why Jung has this paragraph somewhere. I can't literally repeat it, but I'm paraphrasing it now. He basically says Jesus is like an amulet. He represents an experience so that the masses don't have to experience it. That's why they keep that amulet sort of alive. That's why they wear it, so it doesn't happen to them. It doesn't happen to me. So therefore, I belong to one belongs to a church, one belongs to a collective, because God forbid you exit that collective, it will happen to you. You will, I think he actually uses the term, you'll be in the frying pan then, or Edinger uses it somewhere. You're in the frying pan then, so as long as you belong to a collective, then it has happened. But it will happen to you. It will happen to you once you're outside of that collective, because then you're not projecting it anymore. Then you are in the process of actually of letting it, having it incarnate in you. And that is terrible.
Yeah, that's what struck me most, because then you later talked about being in the breach of being between the light and dark side of the self and having to contain that as your own immediate experience rather than having something else mediated for you.
Well, that is, I think it's Edinger, again, in his final Old Testament lecture, which I highly recommend, the whole series, of course, but this last one has just an incredible speech about Amalek and about standing between the opposites as the place that we should choose, that we belong in, being neither identified with Jacob nor with Amalek. That is terribly hard, and he even says you have to, in order to be in the middle, you have to at one point go over to the other side. You have to at one point, at least momentarily, at least for a period, identify with Amalek, in order to stand in the middle. So but it totally makes sense. He says this is the position we have to take now, knowing all that we should know from Jung. It still is hard. It still is, Edinger himself says that he has problems with it, but he realizes this is our task, to try to stand between. Now, you see, if you look at the politics of the present day, I mean, the moment you start to talk, people want you to actually take sides. They want you to take sides. They don't want that person that stands in the breach, because of course, what would that mean? That would mean that there is another position to take other than this or that. Things are not black and white. There is something else in between. But it's not so much about things are not black and white. It's about that position, and only that position between the opposites allows you to hold them, and to see them. Because once you're on one side or on the other, you're gone. You're a goner. You're identified. You will not see the other side. And you can see it today. Just watch yourself as you're watching this whole Trump thing, or watching that whole Hamas thing. It's you immediately, you want to, of course, belong to Jacob, but of course. The Hamas guys on the other hand, they think they're Jacob. It's the same thing. So how do you find a position that takes that in? First of all, you can't solve it outside. That's not your area of action. The area of action you have to take is you have to realize, what does that mean inside me when I get so aggravated about the political situation outside? What's that in me? Why is that? Why am I pouncing on that? Why is my psyche so attracted to this conflict? Is it possibly shielding or guarding or making invisible a conflict like that's inside of me, and that I would actually have a chance to solve or to hold, So.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that your presentation beautifully brought all those
Thank
concepts.
you. In general, of course, that Edinger repeats this several times. the psychological rule is for if this happens in a dream, whatever comes on your table, whatever's on your table, whatever you're served, you should eat, even if it's disgusting. And I think he mentions eating shit or something like that. I remember once I had a dream. I don't even know whether I should tell this, but anyway, it was a dream where I was served a snail, not a live one, with its house intact, and a bit of grass and a bit of dirty soil along with it on a nice plate. And this was at a person's house who was very important for me professionally speaking. And I realized after I woke up, of course, during the dream, it was, what is this? I realized, okay, to me, it was, what it meant to me was I have to be very patient with that person, you know, like a snail. I have that is a snail that I have to digest. I have to. And it's good we have that experience of Edingers, who says you have to, because of course you would come up with, well, there are exceptions. You don't always have to, you know, and already you're a goner. By assuming you have to, it makes you think, well, maybe there is something to that snail, that I want things to happen fast. I want him to act fast in my favor, you know, that person that has just served me this. But obviously it's disgusting, and it's an image of slowness, and I have to take that in. What does that mean for me? So.
Di Marcel, I think your hand was up as well. I think you're muted.
Yeah, it was. I don't have a question. I just wanted to share my appreciation for a new orientation of seeing the dream as a Eucharist. It's very helpful. Speaking to the attitude we hold for the dream. On my dream journal, I have embossed Amor Fati, and I'm thinking I might need to change that to, what did you say? For heaven's sake. Because very often, isn't that how we get caught up? It's like, for heaven's sake, what did that mean? Mm-hmm, and then to really hold the attitude that this is for heaven's sake. And this is why it's important. And this is why I'm going to hold it that way. Especially, I was especially moved by your sharing about your housemate, the older woman in Beverly Hills you shared the home with, and that experience you had, the capacity to see and not own the darkness that was surfacing. That's so important, because it can be very overwhelming. It can be very overwhelming when we are, our attention is called to that. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you for staying up late for us.
Yeah. Oh, it's not that late. Here it's what? It's 10 now almost. Okay. Let me just maybe add that, you know, there is a piece of synchronicity. I already talked to Carmen, Nancy, and Estella about it, but it's really a remarkable piece of synchronicity in that a couple of days ago, I finished this paper, this presentation, finished writing it. And I had to congratulate a couple of people. So I wrote some birthday messages. I had to look it up and so on. And it was only then that I noticed that 2 days ago, the day I had finished, was Corpus Christi. In other words, that is the day in the Catholic Church where the celebration is of the host, the Eucharist, or what is to be taken in during the Eucharist, is being celebrated and actually carried around in Andalusia, also here in Spain. They do it in certain parts of Germany, not everywhere anymore, but it happened to be Corpus Christi. You know.
Congratulations! What a lovely synchronicity.
It's a synchronicity. It's
yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a an archetype that's constellated, and it's wonderful at first, and then it makes you afraid because you could be swallowed up by it. You could be inflated, a moment later. But still, I thought it was so wonderful. I should mention it that I mean, I worked on this since November, and I happened to finish it on that day. Or it finished itself on that day, I should say.
Patrick, you mentioned that you were talking about the woman from the TV series, right? That she had this situation that Job never accepted. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, she goes one step further. Job keeps the tie with God. He keeps the bridge, the connection alive. He never swears off God, which is what his wife, if you remember in the story, basically suggests to him. She says to him, why don't you damn God and die? You've gone through hell here. Damn God and die. He refuses to do that. And by this, he holds the connection. Now, this holding the connection, of course, eventually basically reaches its climax in the fact that God appears, after the fourth friend, Eliphaz has spoken. It is God appears in the whirlwind, and you have that long speech where God mightily appears before Job, and Job listens. In this case, the woman, the detective, says, I believe in God. That's the first answer she gives to the man she wants to question. Once he asks her, do you believe in God? Yes, I believe in God, but no connection. Mm-hmm. I am here and there is God. He's alone too. It almost sounds, it has that touch of punishment. Mm-hmm. We don't have a connection. And so, like now I'm reminded of that wonderful instance of Edinger in one of his lectures, where he remembers an instance during a lecture in New York, where a New Yorker listening to him lecturing on some book of the Old Testament, I don't know exactly what it was. That person, she stood up and she said, I don't like Yahweh. She says, I don't like Yahweh. I don't like Yahweh. And Edinger says, that is really not the point. Oh, it is in regard to all the extermination, basically, all these people that are being exterminated as Israel moves into the promised land, And so for several pages in the Bible, you have a record of all these people that are being wiped out by God, basically by, not by God, but by the armies, the 7 armies that are basically being destroyed. So she says she got up and said, I don't like Yahweh. In other words, I don't like all this cruelty and so on. Mm-hmm. And Edinger says, that's not the point. Of course we don't like that. Of course we don't like that kind of cruelty. But the point is to understand it in the sense of to really see it. And then maybe we have a chance by being conscious of doing something with it. Mm. But by saying, I don't like God, it's almost like that detective who says, I'm alone, and so is he, his fault, he went that way. And now because he's that way, we're, of course, there's no connection. So I'm alone, but so is he, that's childish, that is not really knowing what's at stake. And so, childish or not, it seems to be our condition these days. If you look at if you look at what's being produced, you look at what's out there, nihilism, this attitude, aesthetically, very often aesthetically dramatized, is the cool thing. It's almost politically correct, I would say. It's realistic. It is, well, that's what science tells us. You know, we can't, there's no machine, there's no sensor that could prove that there is a higher being or whatever out there. Whatever, all of that is being ignored. The psyche, of course, is being totally ignored. These people know nothing about dreams. None of them remember dreams. But it is a coldness that is spreading, and that can be, it can have an effect like a disease, you know. It takes over unconsciously everything. And basically what it means is that the center is, of course, is missing. The center is missing. And there's no patience to stare at the center and see if something comes up. And this lack of patience is childish, you know. It's like, okay, he abandoned me, so I abandoned him, and now we're both alone, and so what? Why she even says, I believe in God, it's interesting. She wants to explain to him, and she starts to talk about her tour, but then she breaks off. She breaks off because she has that vision at that moment. Mm-hmm. And she does not see who is standing in front of her. She would never, as a conventional believer, could never identify what's in front of her as an image of God. Mm-hmm. You know, that he would appear like this, and so all we have, as Jung says, is our psychological tools to reapply ourselves to these religious problems and to the religious matters. And if something like the Eucharist, you know, which has been around traditionally for so long, but as something that is completely outside. Yes, we take something inside traditionally, but it's almost, well, I can't say it's emptied of meaning, not at all. But it is, it doesn't have that demanding, that relationship that a dream really demands of you, a personal dream that came to you only, that is not tradition and has not been around for 1,000 years. It's only there that one night, and it's there and it comes to you. And if we could find a way to see it as I said, as a holy substance from the transpersonal to us, then we're, I can only think of the German word now, in the Pflicht, we are, then we're, suddenly there is an obligation, you know, if you see it like that. It's not, oh, another dream, what else? And tomorrow I'll have another one. It becomes personal. Mm-hmm. And a relationship attitude towards that dream and towards its content is being demanded, you know. And that could that could amount to pouring it into molds of immediate experience. I mean, what's more immediate experience-wise as a dream, you know? Mm-hmm.
Yes, that piece about, you know, the self-sacrificing something for us to offer up the dream is very meaningful to me. And that idea that it does take a part of itself to fill us with it.
See, this is to me the fascinating aspect of this. This is something that, you know, we stress, of course, with Jung, we stress the incarnation of the substance. So what do we have to do, in order to incarnate, and how does it incarnate in us, and so on. And I take a step slightly to the side and try to see it, well, almost from the perspective of the self. Of course, that's an inflation, but in imagination, I do it. And I say, well, what we call incarnation from the point of view of the self is kenosis, an emptying of itself. So then it becomes really, that really becomes emotional to me, because then I'm observing not the taker, we as the takers of the substance, but I'm observing somebody who gives, keeps giving constantly. Now, why does he do this? And then even emotions come up. Of course, they are projected and so on, but it's almost something like it's almost a pitiful thing. This thing, this agency, this divine, it keeps giving, keeps being rejected too, keeps being ignored, and then suddenly a feeling relationship is there. And then I'm saying, well, why does it do that? Why does it keep doing that? Always in the hopes, like somebody writing a letter to someone, never getting an answer back. And then I'm thinking that gives a different tinge to an image like that Jesus brings up when he identifies with the shadow. Why does he identify with the shadow? Why does he pick that psalm up, Psalm 22 or whatever, that crucifixion psalm, where he says, I am a worm. I am a worm. Where does this? Yes, of course, the opposites, we can say he's the greatest and he's also the worm. But where does this even come from? And then I'm thinking, well, let's just admit that there is a chance that there is a great desire on the part of the Godhead or on the part of the Numen, a great desire, a longing to find us, to be taken in, to be absorbed by consciousness, consciously. See, a great longing. I described that rise of the infernals in me during that scene with the old lady, to come under her hand, to come to the edge of my skull, basically. I describe it as longing. It had a feeling like this stuff was longing to come all the way up as close as possible. Is it possible to assume that there is a longing, even something like that, as a longing in that numinous agency that sends us the dream, and that these piecemeal substances that are being, these comments on our lives, or these wishes, or whatever you want to call them, that they are written longingly with emotion, in a sense. And that makes our coldness or our indifference or our neglect of them, our overlooking them, it gives it an emotional quality.
Yes.
And yes, maybe that's not totally scientific, and so who cares? In this moment, maybe that little bit of emotion that has been inserted or injected, if it makes me look more closely at my dream aspects of it and look at what I was given there, so much the better.
Ingrid, I think your hand is up. I think you're muted.
You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I just was wondering if you would repeat that you said, of course, we don't like the cruelty. So we're talking about digesting, eating, the fish. We don't like the cruelty, but we have to. What did you say? You were talking about we have to understand what's at stake and not be childish. Meaning we have to what?
Well, this is all said in the context of, to put it bluntly and rawly, the Messiah as a psychological content should not remain projected, has to die. It even has to suffer. It even has to be tortured. Now, these are all images that that I'm taking right now. I'm taking it from the Passion accounts in the Gospels. There, it is all outside. It's all outside. And then Jesus says, you know, you want to persuade me to evade that torture, to evade that crucifixion. You are wrong. You are not acting sort of on the behalf of the archetypal psyche, he would say if he spoke in psychological terms. You are acting by projecting your personal motivation onto me, and you want to save me because I was basically wonderfully running your life and telling you where to go and telling you what to preach and giving you a certain amount of authority over the demons. That's not the point. Now, in order for this Messiah content or Savior content to be taken inside and for it to become something, namely a content that is unconscious in you, that has that ability to save you, that has that ability to orient itself towards a center. In order to do that, you have to see it as an internal dynamism and not get hooked on the historical image. This is what we've been doing, of course, you know, when we say, you know, such and such is a Christ killer, or these people have done this or that, or even within the church, you know, look at what's happening in the Church of the Resurrection. You know, you have, I think, 4 or 5 factions in there. The Armenians, you have the different churches and so on. They get into physical struggle over stuff. It's unbelievable. This is all because they are taking the symbol literally. And when you take the symbol literally, you have not understood a thing about its actual meaning, which is a psychological meaning. You have left it outside, and where it can be wonderfully dealt with, you know, you're taking this side or you're taking that side, you're living an identified life, but you're not doing the actual work, you know. I mean, I realize that we are, by way of Jung and by way of Edinger and von Franz and so on, we are in a position where we can see it like that. Where would we be without them? You know, we would not even have this point of view or this standpoint, this elevated ground from which we see this stuff now. But we see it now. And now that we've seen it, and now that we've digested it and understood it, you know, tested it in our lives, of course, that's very, very important. We can say that it is a big mistake to take these images as non-symbolic. For instance, God, just look at this horror that happened in Paris a few years ago. Remember that that newspaper office that was being stormed by these people who felt that their prophet had been smeared, and that had to be that meant blood had to be spilled, you know, to revenge that. So they were basically still living here in the 20th century, 21st century, still living on the level of the Old Testament people, the Levites, who had to surround the tabernacle as a protection for if people came close to the tabernacle or close to the mountain that God had appeared on, they would have to die. They would have to die. So here, the dynamite quality of the Godhead was understood quite literally. You touch that, you explode, you die. So it was all outside, you see? Well, now, 4,000 years later, whatever, we have a new point of view. We have discovered that this is something in us that we have kept projecting and kept in projection, because keeping it in projection, we don't have to deal with it ourselves. We don't have to go through that crucifixion, that transformation.
So in a dream image a few days ago, there were farm animals.
Can you speak a little more loudly? I can hardly.
In a dream image a few days ago, there was a group of farm animals that I was standing in front of that had all been skinned, and they were all covered with whipped Krisco. I don't even know if there's such a thing as whipped Krisco, but if you know what Krisco is, it's like a southern lard that fries food, that they use to fry food. And in the dream, the Krisco was a salve to their skin that had, because their covers had been removed. But it was also, I guess, a preparation to be cooked at the same time. And it was so horrifying. I said to myself, I gotta get out of here. And I said, I have to save myself, and I have to leave, and I have to leave these animals to their fate. And I felt terrible, but I said, I have to leave or else I'll die too. And when you talk about the fish dream, it makes me see the whole dream in a different light.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of a dream comes to mind that Edinger mentions in one of his lectures, also in one of his books. He talks about this wonderful teacher that had a dream of a ritual that she's in with her pupils, young pupils, and as she realizes what's happening, she sees that these pupils are trying to slaughter a goat. I think it was a black or a white goat. And her first instinct is she wants to get out of there. She wants to escape. But then I think she realizes that she has to help them. She has to stay there and help them. And then after the dream, she drew an image. It was an active imagination, and Edinger actually reproduces the image. It's of the slaughtered animal on an altar, and all around the altar, all down the altar, the blood of the animal is streaming, and where the blood falls, flowers come up and vegetation comes up and life basically rises from the ground. So there was a moment there where one of the kids, I think it was a black kid, she said, barred the door, stopped her from escaping, So she had an animus there, a very young animus that prevented the ego from escaping. And so she had to go through the ordeal. So now you have a situation, we've talked about this, where, of course, I don't know, I'm doing things I shouldn't be doing, but I don't know what the circumstances are, what actual life circumstances this dream is embedded in. But in general, I would say, I would go back to it and examine each detail. I mean, the whole thing with the lard and why they're skinned and so on, these animals, why are they skinned? And the lard seems to be, I think you said, actually a sort of a healing substance or a protection, the fat, a protection for the lack of their skin. I would try to relate that every single detail to what is that in my life. I understand I escaped, the situation was too horrible, but what is it here that these are instincts, of course, as animals. What is it here that is being readied to sacrifice, in other words, to transform, and therefore to transform me? And of course, that's something I don't want, because transformation is terrible. It's terribly painful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It makes me think, Patrick, of what you just said about the sacrifice of the self, right? That great feeling involved in that situation, in that dream, Ingrid. The great feeling of these animals that have no skin and what's offering them up.
Yes.
There is a comment on the chat, and it says also Krisco, and this is from Sophie, is synthetic, that is man-made, where lard is animal fat.
Uh-huh. Oh, Krisco is man-made, but it has a function of, or is a substitute for lard, actually.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, all of that is what I'm thinking of when I hear lard or whatever is that situation, that very early myth of Promethean myth, where Prometheus actually cheats the gods, by collecting only the bones and spreading the lard over the bones, but taking the flesh, the actual flesh, and reserving that for man, for the human beings. So they're I don't know, may not apply at all. It's just something that came to me when you said lard. Let me ask about that wonderful Birkhäuser image.
Yes.
There is a Birkhäuser image that I thought of when I had finished writing this paper, at least when I was at a certain stage. Yes. This is the image on Eva Bertenschlag Birkhäuser's book, Window on Eternity. It's the cover, actually. And so it's entitled Window on Eternity. But it is something that now, I don't know, I can't bring, can I do this? How do I get back to my text? Now that you've put this up, I can't go back.
Nancy, you want to exit out so he can get his words back, and then you can put it back up.
Yes. Oh, okay. Here we go. Now, here. Yes, it is sort of what I call here a speculation or an active imagination, actually. Are you looking at the image now?
Let's put it back up, Nancy.
Yeah, let's put up the Birkhäuser image.
I've got it here.
Yeah, because I'll just read these lines once more. I say, I realize I'm painting a picture here to give you an image, a speculative representation of what might be happening in her, in Carrie Ann, and in us when we dream. I might as well call it my active imagination on the image. It is as if from beyond the dream, from deep in the unconscious, a divine agency, this figure that you see here, a divine agency, were sacrificing something for this person, sacrificing something of its unlimited self, sacrificing something unlimited, the symbol, the image, the dream itself. And this sacrifice, this Eucharist, happens in us the very moment that divine agency defines the image and defines whom the image, the dream, the nourishment, its holy substance is meant for. The numen, as it were, draws with its numinous finger a limiting frame to enter our limited world, to create a window into it, to transmit in limited terms something extracted from its own limitless being, something we experience as the dream, a moment in time and space, as it offers up to us a substance which translates itself as dream. This frame or this window is the window moment of the dream occurring in us. The dream by which we are named, the dream which always and anywhere addresses only us. We are being named and addressed as that individual, framed as that limited, defined location or individual vessel, selected as that limited tabernacle, receiving the substance meant only for us. So that sort of, these are lines that would be in a way describing how I feel about this image. In other words, I see us in this image as looking from the point of view of the numinous agency. We're on the other side. We're in basically almost something like no time, no space. And the numen, by drawing the quadrangle, by drawing the frame, delimits the limitless. And by delimiting the limitless, it's as if it started to speak in our human language. In other words, in the language of beings that are limited, that are to be vessels, and so on. So drawing the frame is like the happening of the dream at that moment. I see this being, this green being, as a numinous agency because I see it as something that light issues from. This is not an eye that is receiving light the way a human being would do, but it's an eye that gives off light. And the greenness, of course, is almost like it is life, how's that sentence that made Jung think so much in Isaiah? My dead are living, it says, my dead are living. God is a God of the living, not the dead. This is even a deduction that wonderfully Jesus made, from a little fact. Moses in front of the burning bush, who's being addressed by God as, I am the God of your fathers, of Abraham, and so on. And he deduces that the fact that God talks about these forebears as if they were living, that indeed they are living, and that God is a God of the living ones. So my dead are living. That is the line in Isaiah that stunned Jung. I found this just a few days ago in what Jackie had sent us, namely that book of Aniela Jaffe's, where she has made notes on stuff that did not end up in memory streams or reflections. And among them was this line that apparently jumped into or made itself known to Jung and basically left a deep impression in him, and caused him to speculate on life after death, which is what a lot of these notes are concerned with,
Mm-hmm.
So this is a wonderful, wonderful image, and I have to apologize, but these are my thoughts on it. I have no idea what Peter Bierkhuizer thought. What caused this image? What caused him to work on this image and to use this perspective and so on. So, but I allow myself, something like an active imagination if I'm deeply gripped by it, and in this case I was, and it was, I thought, wait a second, what I'm describing is something that is very similar to what Eva used as her cover for the book, Window on Eternity. Only, of course, in this case, it would be window from eternity. He's looking, the frame shows something that is, in a sense, limited compared to where the numen is coming from. Let me just ask you very, do we have some more questions, or are we even close to our limit? I forgot.
Well, we're sitting here, Patrick, we're at 1:30, 1:33.
Okay, so we are over the limit already, or?
Yes,
Okay.
we are here.
Okay, we're here.
We've
Okay.
arrived.
Well, are there any questions that are pressing or that you want some comment on?
Do you see anything, Estella?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Absolutely stunning, Patrick. Just wonderful
Thanks.
to listen to, and just so inspiring. It's tremendously important too.
Thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I'm so glad that the people in our community have gotten a chance to know you in this deep way now. I think that's really significant to me too.
Yeah, to me also. Yes, definitely.
Patrick, if I may ask, with this paper that you've been working on, are you hoping to publish, make it available to a wider audience? I think it really, as to echo Carmen, it's really important work.
Good question. I did submit an early draft of this, about half the length of what you heard tonight, to Psych Perspectives, and haven't heard back from them yet. I think they have a session sometime in June. But of course, I would, now that I have this, longer paper, twice as long or whatever, I'd like to see some of that, at least, if not all of it. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what they can afford. We'll have to see whether they like the approach at all,
Yeah. Once again, wonderful, fabulous.
Thank you so much, Jorge. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to me.
It's so deep and so rich in so many places, and the symbolism around the Holy Eucharist, and with its relationship to the dream and dream symbols. I'm sort of beyond words. I'm just so moved, both personally and from my place in doing this work. Yes, with others.
I'm using images, of course, that are part of the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church and so on, yes, where you have something like a Eucharist. But I hope that by, of course, approaching it from the psychological side, I'm opening up this wonderful image to people who have nothing to do with the Christian faith, because they can't deny the reality of the dreams they have almost on a daily basis. What are they? And once you start seeing them as a holy substance, then you're removed from the outside tradition, even if you're coming from Judaism, for instance, or whatever, you might be able to take it that way. And then indeed, something would have been melted down and flown into a new mold of immediate experience, the dream.
There's one more question, Johanna.
Yeah, I would just like to say that, to share a quote from that originates from the Talmud and is of course translated. A dream not understood is a letter not opened.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there you have the whole wonderful, this is just wonderful. There you have the whole idea of somebody has written you a letter. There you have that whole emotional longing aspect of it, I may be wrong by emotionalizing it because, of course, I'm leaving the purely scientific plateau, so to speak. But on the other hand, we're dealing with the psyche, and we're not dealing with a frosted substance, that is ice cold and can only be approached or treated from an ice cold rational point of view. We have feeling, and that's one of our functions that and so why not use that too, at least for a moment, as long as we're aware that we're doing it. I think it's legal, even scientifically speaking. That is perfect. A dream not looked at or answered is a letter unopened. That's perfect. Where is that in the Talmud? Do you happen to have a stupid one?
I do not.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is also something that I see. Okay, now I've just taken on something that I myself despise. The question, where is that source? Can you quote that source and so on? So much. God, if I just imagine the amount of time that's wasted in the Edinger lectures by people who did not read the assignment, asking for where is that quote from, and then Edinger has to look it up, and then, okay, so are you telling me you're actually going to go back and read that paragraph again, paragraph so-and-so where that quote's from? No, understand it here and now. Here and now. This, what Johanna just brought in, that is like a dream. That is an image that is so beautiful. It is like a dream, and it has to be dealt with on the spot, so even if you had invented it and it's not in the Talmud, it's worthy of it, it's so perfect.